Adam Silver didn't expect a routine labor standoff to metastasize into something far more destabilizing. What began as quiet negotiations between the league and the WNBPA hardened into a philosophical split about what the WNBA actually is at this stage of its life. Owners came armed with numbers, guarantees, and caution, insisting the league still survives on NBA subsidies and fragile margins. The players arrived with momentum and receipts, sold-out arenas, soaring ratings, and a cultural surge powered by Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese turning regular season games into national events. In that clash, the usual give-and-take collapsed. The union rejected offers that would have doubled salaries and shattered historical pay ceilings, not because the money was insufficient, but because it didn't answer the deeper question of ownership over the league's future. Revenue sharing wasn't a perk. It was a declaration that the players believed the WNBA had crossed a threshold owners refused to acknowledge. The standoff hardened as deadlines closed in. Free agency, the expansion draft, and training camps were all shoved into a narrow corridor, with the league declaring a legal status quo while moving forward anyway. On paper, operations continued. In reality, uncertainty bled into everything. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. Owners bet time was on their side, assuming guaranteed money would eventually outweigh risk. Players bet leverage was peaking, convinced that the current popularity surge would never be stronger than it is right now. The danger sat in the middle, a league growing louder and more visible while its foundation quietly cracked. Without alignment, the same momentum that lifted the WNBA could become the force that destabilized it, turning a labor dispute into a referendum on whether growth without shared belief can survive at all. The headlines sound dramatic, but the reality underneath it is colder and more procedural. The WNBA didn't shut down overnight, and nobody flipped a switch and walked away. What actually happened is far more unsettling. The league reached the end of its collective bargaining agreement with the players' union, and instead of clarity, it entered a legally mandated holding pattern. No new deal, no new rules, just a frozen moment where everyone keeps working while disagreeing on the future. From the league office perspective, this wasn't chaos. It was compliance. Under U.S. labor law, when a CBA expires, employers must maintain the status quo. That means the league can't change pay structures, benefits, or working conditions until a new agreement is reached. So the WNBA kept moving. Teams were told to prepare for free agency. Expansion planning continued. The business calendar rolled forward, even as the foundation underneath it stayed unresolved. This is where the tension starts to surface, because maintaining the status quo doesn't mean stability. It means delay. And delay, in a league riding its biggest wave of attention in decades, comes with real risk. Behind the scenes, ownership believed it was offering something substantial. The proposal on the table included dramatic salary increases. Maximum contracts would rise to roughly $1.3 million. Rookie salaries would start around $250,000. These weren't cosmetic bumps. They represented a complete reset of how WNBA players are paid compared to previous agreements. For ownership, this was a headline. Guaranteed money, predictable costs, a system that rewards players immediately without tying compensation to revenue streams that fluctuate year to year. The league is still unprofitable and continues to rely heavily on financial support from the NBA. From that perspective, locking in higher salaries felt like a responsible step forward without exposing the league to financial instability. But the players' union didn't see it the same way. They rejected the offer, not because the money wasn't significant, but because it didn't address what they believe is a real issue, revenue participation. That rejection reframed everything. What ownership saw as progress, the union saw as avoidance. The disagreement isn't about whether players should earn more. Both sides agree on that. The disconnect is about how the league defines value. Owners are focused on costs and sustainability. Players are focused on growth and upside. The union's position is rooted in the league's recent surge, record viewership, major sponsorship deals, a flood of media attention driven by new stars and expanding audiences. From the player's perspective, This growth didn't happen by accident. It happened because of their labor, their visibility, and their marketability. They want percentage of league revenue, not just higher salaries. They want to participate in the upside, especially during a moment when the league's profile has never been higher. Ownership sees that same moment and draws a different conclusion. Growth is real, but profits are not. Revenue is increasing, but expenses are rising faster. Expansion costs, marketing, infrastructure, travel, and facilities are all expensive. Revenue sharing, in their view, introduces risk into a business that hasn't proven long-term profitability. This is not a philosophical debate. It's a structural one. Kathy Engelbert, as commissioner, the job is to keep the league operational while negotiations continue. That's exactly what happened. Teams were instructed to proceed as if the season would move forward on schedule. Free agency planning continued. The expansion draft timeline stayed intact. Training camp windows were mapped out. This wasn't a power move. It was a containment strategy. The league wanted to avoid a scenario where unresolved negotiations created logistical chaos. By keeping teams active, the league preserved leverage and maintained the appearance of normalcy. At the same time, this approach signaled confidence. Ownership believed time was on its side. With guaranteed salary increases already offered, the league calculated that players would eventually feel pressure to accept certainty over risk. But that calculation assumes momentum holds. And momentum is fragile. Speaks. The compressed timeline made everything more volatile. Expansion drafts, free agency, and training camps are usually spread out. Here, they were stacked tightly together. Any disruption would ripple quickly. Missed deadlines, delayed signings, uncertainty for players making career decisions without knowing the financial framework they're committing to. For players, that uncertainty cuts both ways. Holding out for revenue sharing during a growth spike makes sense strategically. But growth spikes don't last forever. Viewership can flatten. Sponsorship interest can cool. Media attention can move on. Ownership is betting that the union understands this risk. That waiting too long could mean negotiating from a weaker position if momentum slows before profitability arrives. The union is betting the opposite, that this is the strongest leverage moment they will ever have. Speaks. What makes the standoff especially tense is that both arguments are rational. Owners are investing millions into expansion and infrastructure without guaranteed returns. Players are producing the product that drives attention, sponsorships, and broadcast deals. Neither side is acting irrationally. They're just operating from incompatible frameworks. Guaranteed salaries provide immediate security. Revenue sharing provides long-term participation. One prioritizes stability. The other prioritizes equity and growth. And right now, the league's financial reality makes it difficult to fully satisfy both. This is why compromise keeps coming up in quiet conversations. Limited revenue sharing tied to specific streams. Media rights participation. Bonuses triggered by profitability thresholds. Solutions exist on paper. The problem is trust. And trust is already strained. The longer negotiations drag on, the greater the risk to the league's public narrative. The WNBA's recent surge has been fueled by positive coverage, star-driven interest, and the sense that the league is finally breaking through to a broader audience. Labor disputes don't play well in that environment. Even without canceled games, the perception of instability can undermine momentum. Sponsors hesitate. Fans get confused. Media narratives shift from growth to conflict. Ownership understands this risk, but they also understand precedent. Agreeing to revenue sharing before profitability is established could lock the league into obligations that outpace its financial capacity. From their perspective, this isn't about winning a negotiation. It's about protecting the league's future. The status quo period creates an illusion of calm. Games are planned. Contracts are discussed. Business continues. But underneath, the unresolved disagreement continues to shape every decision. Players are being asked to commit to teams without knowing what the next CBA will look like. Owners are being asked to invest further, while revenue participation remains unresolved. This limbo benefits no one long term. It simply delays the moment of reckoning. And that's where the stakes become clear. If this dispute spills into the season, the damage won't be limited to finances. Relationships will fray, trust will erode. The collaborative energy that fueled recent growth could disappear. Both sides know this. Both sides are still holding their ground. At its core, this dispute reflects a broader challenge in women's professional sports. Growth is accelerating faster than financial models can adapt. Players are demanding structures that reflect their value. Leagues are trying to balance ambition with sustainability. There is no easy resolution. A deal built purely on guaranteed salaries may feel insufficient to players who see the league's rising profile. A deal built heavily on revenue sharing may feel reckless to owners still operating at a loss. Some form of hybrid solution appears inevitable. The question is how much damage occurs before it arrives. Speaks. If a compromise is reached, it will likely be framed as progress. Limited revenue participation, increased salaries, guardrails to protect the league's finances, public statements about partnership and shared goals. But even then, the aftershocks will remain. Negotiations like this leave scars. They shape future bargaining. They influence trust on both sides of the table. The WNBA is at a crossroads not because it's failing, but because it's growing faster than its structures were designed to handle. How this moment is resolved will determine whether that growth becomes sustainable or self-defeating. If you want to stay updated on how this situation unfolds, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. What complicates this even further is the public framing of the dispute. From the outside, it can look like a simple standoff over money. Players want more. Owners are resisting. But that framing misses the real tension underneath. This isn't about whether players deserve higher pay. Ownership already conceded that point with a salary proposal. The real fight is about control over the league's financial future. Revenue sharing doesn't just change paychecks. It changes risk allocation. It ties player compensation directly to the league's performance, which owners argue is still too volatile to guarantee. From their perspective, the NBA subsidy isn't a minor detail. It's central. The WNBA operates with ongoing financial support. Until that changes, owners believe revenue sharing would mean distributing money that doesn't technically exist as profit. That argument may sound cold, but it's rooted in accounting reality rather than public optics. The players' union isn't ignoring those realities. They're challenging the premise that profitability should be the gatekeeper for revenue participation. Their position is that growth itself has value, and that value is being created now. Record viewership isn't hypothetical. Sponsorship expansion isn't speculative. Media attention isn't theoretical. The league's profile has undeniably changed, and the players see that as proof their labor is producing measurable returns. From their side, accepting guaranteed salary increases without revenue participation feels like locking themselves into a system that caps their upside just as the league breaks through. That's why the rejection of the offer wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. It signaled that this negotiation is about structure, not just numbers. The league's decision to keep moving forward operationally is also strategic. By instructing teams to prepare for free agency and expansion draft, the league maintains leverage and reinforces the idea that the season will proceed. This approach minimizes panic. It keeps sponsors engaged. It reassures broadcasters. And it places subtle pressure on the union by signaling that ownership isn't flinching. At the same time, it puts players in a difficult position. Career decisions are being made in an environment where the financial framework could change at any moment. That uncertainty isn't theoretical. It affects contracts, relocation decisions, and long-term planning. The status quo protects legal compliance, but it doesn't protect clarity. Speaks. The compressed calendar amplifies every unresolved issue. Expansion drafts affect roster spots. Free agency determines income stability. Training camps require commitment. All of it is happening against a backdrop of unresolved labor terms. This is where the risk of miscalculation grows. If negotiations drag on too long, the league risks creating a logjam of decisions made under incomplete information. That kind of environment breeds resentment. Ownership is betting that certainty will ultimately outweigh ambition. that players will choose guaranteed money now over hypothetical revenue later. The union is betting that this moment of leverage won't come again. Neither side is bluffing. They're simply reading the same moment differently. Another layer of tension comes from precedent across professional sports. Revenue sharing is standard in many leagues, but those leagues reach that point after establishing profitability. The WNBA is trying to negotiate that structure during its growth phase. Owners worry that committing too early could restrict flexibility just as the league needs it most. Marketing investments, expansion fees, and infrastructure spending all require capital. Revenue sharing reduces the margin for error. Players counter that waiting for profitability could mean waiting indefinitely, especially if growth is driven by labor without corresponding participation. This circular logic is what makes compromise so difficult. Each side's solution depends on the other conceding first. Public messaging has remained measured, but the underlying power struggle is unmistakable. Ownership is signaling patience. The union is signaling resolve. The league's confidence comes from control over operations and timelines. The players' leverage comes from public interest and the risk of reputational damage if momentum stalls. Neither side wants to be blamed for undermining the league's growth, but both sides are willing to risk short-term friction to protect long-term priorities. This is a danger zone, not because collapse is imminent, but because trust erodes quietly in moments like this. If a resolution comes, it will likely be framed as a win for everyone. Increased salaries, some form of revenue participation, safeguards for financial sustainability. But framing doesn't erase memory. Players will remember holding out during a moment of peak attention. Owners will remember being asked to share revenue before profitability. Those memories shape future negotiations. They influence how risks are evaluated. They linger well beyond the press releases. The league's challenge isn't just closing this deal. It's rebuilding alignment afterward. Speaks. This dispute matters because it arrives at a defining moment. The WNBA isn't fighting for relevance anymore. It's fighting to define its next phase. Growth has created opportunity, but it has also exposed structural gaps. Compensation models built for survival are colliding with expectations built for expansion. How this is resolved will set a precedent for how the league handles success, whether it prioritizes caution or participation, whether growth is treated as shared value or managed risk. The first hook is simple and uncomfortable. A league can be growing and still be fragile at the same time. That's the position the WNBA is in right now. Momentum is real. Attention is real. But so is a financial dependency that hasn't gone away. Those two truths are colliding in real time. The second part of that reality is harder to say out loud. Growth doesn't automatically fix structural problems. It exposes them. And this labor dispute is forcing everyone involved to confront questions the league could previously delay. Who absorbs risk? Who benefits from upside? And how much patience exists on either side before the cost becomes too high? The second hook cuts even closer. Nobody in this standoff is acting recklessly, but someone will eventually pay a price. If ownership waits too long and momentum fades, leverage disappears. If players wait too long and profitability doesn't materialize, guaranteed money may never return in the same form. What makes this moment different from past negotiations is timing. This isn't happening during stagnation. It's happening during acceleration. That raises the stakes for every decision, because the opportunity cost of getting it wrong is enormous. From the league perspective, patience is not indifference. It's strategy. Ownership believes that by continuing operations and honoring the status quo, they are demonstrating stability rather than hostility. The message is that the league is bigger than any single negotiation cycle. But stability can look like stonewalling depending on where you sit. For players, watching the league push forward while refusing revenue sharing feels dismissive of their role in driving growth. That perception matters, even if the legal and financial logic is sound. This is where misalignment deepens. One side is speaking in spreadsheets and projections. The other is speaking in visibility and cultural impact. Both are correct within their own frameworks. The commissioner's role in moments like this is often misunderstood. It's not about picking sides. It's about keeping the structure intact while both sides test their leverage. That means enforcing timelines, maintaining public calm, and preventing internal panic. But it also means absorbing criticism from both directions. Players want urgency. Owners want restraint. Fans want answers that don't exist yet. This balancing act becomes harder the longer negotiations stretch on. Silence starts to feel intentional. Neutrality starts to feel like avoidance. And every passing week increases pressure to show progress, even if none has been finalized. Speaks. The broader risk isn't a canceled season. It's erosion. Erosion of trust. Erosion of goodwill. Erosion of the shared narrative that growth benefits everyone equally. Labor disputes rarely end leagues overnight. They weaken them gradually. Missed opportunities. Hesitant partners. Fans who tune out during uncertainty and don't fully come back. That's the quiet danger here. Not collapse, but slowdown. And in a league still proving its long-term model, slowdown is costly. Eventually, a deal will happen. History suggests that compromise is unavoidable. The unresolved question is what each side gives up to reach it, and whether the relationship can be repaired afterward. This dispute will be remembered as a defining moment because it forces a decision about what kind of league the WNBA wants to be next. One that locks uncertainty early, or one that shares risk in pursuit of upside. At this stage, the standoff is no longer just about numbers on a term sheet. It's about who blinks first. Ownership believes it has already made a historically significant offer by reshaping salary structures in a way the league has never seen. From that angle, the refusal to accept guaranteed money feels less like negotiation and more like escalation. But that interpretation only works if you assume security is the ultimate goal. For the players, security without participation feels incomplete. They see a league benefiting from visibility, relevance, and cultural momentum, and they want formal recognition of that contribution built into the system itself. This is a tension that keeps negotiations frozen. Each side believes it has already compromised more than the other. There's also the question no one wants to answer publicly. What happens if this growth wave crests before a deal is reached? Momentum is not a permanent state. Attention shifts quickly. New storylines replace old ones. Ownership is quietly aware of that risk, which is why keeping operations moving matters so much. The message is continuity, stability, reliability to partners and fans. The players' union understands that risk too, but sees this moment as a rare window where leverage exists. Waiting for a better moment could mean waiting forever. Both sides are negotiating against time, just in opposite ways. What makes this moment defining is that it forces clarity. The league can no longer rely on ambiguity about its future. It must decide how growth is rewarded and who gets to participate in it. This isn't just a labor negotiation. It's a blueprint for how the WNBA handles success, whether it prioritizes predictability or shared upside, whether it treats expansion as proof of sustainability or as a phase that still requires caution. Whatever agreement emerges will echo far beyond this season. It will shape expectations, relationships, and trust for years. Speaks. When the deal finally comes, it will be described as necessary. It will be presented as progress. But the real story will be what it reveals about power, patience, and priorities inside the league. This is the moment where growth stopped being hypothetical and started demanding structure, and how the WNBA answers that demand will determine whether its momentum becomes permanent or temporary. If you want to keep up with how this unfolds, make sure to like the video, share with other fans following the league, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss future updates.